Funding for this program was made possible by the Jewish Healthcare Foundation. Thank you.
In an ever-changing world revolutionized by internet technology, patients have access to more information.
I actually am not bothered by the fact that it's entirely possible that my patient may know more about their disease than I do.
And for many, that access is empowering.
Actually understand what is happening at a molecular level in my body.
This is the ones we take to the doctors where we record the notes.
But is a more informed patient a better patient?
I think empowered patients are kind of the best patient a doctor can have and the worst patient a doctor can have.
Are healthcare providers and medical students ready to embrace this change?
I think that the future of where we're headed will be much better, but it's going to be bumpy.
More information, new choices, changing roles, all leading to a shift in how medicine is practiced as providers are met with the empowered patient.
Come on, Sarah! Good job, well done!
I knew I had cancer before, like when I called my mom and I told her, oh, I have mono. I knew that it was not mono. I started to have dreams about being sick, and I just knew that there was something much more wrong with me than I was letting on.
Katie Gazier has been battling a rare form of leukemia known as CML for a little over a year. During her sophomore year at Penn State University, she started feeling sick and very tired. Katie's parents, Mary Beth and Bob Gazier, live in Robinson Township with Katie's twin brother Bobby and her little sister Grace. Older sister Kelly is married. When Katie told them she was sick, Mary Beth and Bob were concerned, but thought that like any college student, Katie was probably just run down.
Very healthy dog.
I just figured she's in college, you know, it's a lot of work, she's staying up late, she's volunteering for Thon. In addition to classes, she has to go to meetings, and she was tired.
And she has to have straight A's.
She has to have straight A's. Katie puts a lot of pressure on herself to perform everything just perfectly. And I just thought, okay, you know, we'll get this settled over spring break.
Spring break was also where Katie would get some downtime after her year-long efforts on Thon, Penn State's multi-million-dollar annual dance marathon fundraiser.
My first year, we raised $10.68 million, and that was really amazing. And then the year after that, we raised over $12 million.
Thon was an event Katie threw herself into wholeheartedly without knowing that what she learned there would have a big impact on her own life.
There are over 15,000 students who volunteer for this every year, and we raise money to support families whose children have been diagnosed with pediatric cancer. So I'll probably stay up at school until that Thursday.
Over the break, Katie and her mom saw Katie's doctor.
We went to the doctor, and he was feeling, you know, her side, and he said, wow, this is, you know, this is soft, this is hard, this is soft, this is hard. And I'm like, yeah, you know, it's a spleen, she's got mono, you know, she'll rest. It's, you know, spring break, she can rest, whatever, and get back to school. And so the next day we took her for an ultrasound, and about 11 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Wayne called and said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine. I said, how are you? He goes, I wish I could tell you I was better. And I thought he was sick. And I said, oh, what's wrong? He goes, you need to take Catherine to Children's right away. They're waiting for her. And I'm like, okay, all right, so what's up? Because Katie was in the room, and he said, well, her white blood cell count is elevated. And Katie's like, what's wrong? I said, your white blood cell count is elevated. And she goes, Mom, I'm not stupid. I know what that means. And I'm like, okay. I said, you know what? They're just going to rerun all these tests because, Katie, a lot of times these things are wrong. And then I got another call from Dr. Wayne. And we got in the car. She goes, I want my daddy. And I said, okay, you know, we'll call Dad. And I called him. I said, she wants you to come. And he said, okay.
I'm at the office, and the phone rings. It's Mary. And she says, you know, there wasn't much introduction, right? I knew they were the doctor. And she said, Dr. Chen thinks she has leukemia. I said, what? She wants you.
Daddy.
At Children's Hospital, Katie's diagnosis of leukemia would be confirmed. But even though she was frightened, Katie's analytical nature kicked in as doctors explained what was happening inside her body. Dr. Lynn Malik is a pediatric hematology oncology fellow at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh.
And with Katie, I, started with the pretty routine question that I ask, which is, so tell me what you know so far, after I had taken her history. And she's like, I know that my white count is really high, my spleen is super huge, and I probably have leukemia. And that's not something you usually hear.
For Katie, educating herself and understanding her condition was important. But when her parents decided to seek a second opinion, consulting a doctor in Oregon about Katie's leukemia, there was nervousness all around.
What are Dr. Ritchie and Dr. Malik going to think?
You didn't introduce Dr. Ritchie.
Dr. Ritchie, he's the rock star at Children's for the hemo-oncology, as far as we're concerned. And he was Katie's main doctor. And so I don't like to step on anybody's toes. I don't like to get people on the defense. But I knew that this was my daughter, and I was going to do what I needed to do.
Dr. Kim Ritchie, the rock star, was not offended.
There's no one person that is the master of all childhood cancer. There are many masters, okay? And we routinely, when we come up with a child who has a rare diagnosis that we may have seen, but not a lot, we will frequently, if not every time, go to our colleagues in the field of pediatric oncology who may have more experience. That is routine. And in this particular case, we're dealing with a rare disorder, and they went to the person that really was a prime mover in the modern treatment of CML. And it's not surprising to us that they would want to talk with the person who basically invented the drug that is now being used to treat every single person with CML.
Welcoming patients who do their own research is common practice for some providers.
I actually am not bothered by the fact that it's entirely possible that my patient may know more about their disease than I do. I think we need to really work on that really hard to try to make sure that people can take classes.
Dr. Mark Roberts is the chairman of the Department of Health Policy and Management at the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public Health.
I'm also a practicing internist over at the medical school. I see general internal medicine patients, and I do a combination of teaching, patient care, and research.
He is working with some colleagues on that, and he's going to...
I only see patients part-time now, but back when I was much more of a full-time clinician, and I would see 40 or 50 patients in a week, and they would have 30 or 40 different, or 50 or 60 different problems, I can only know what I know about those from my training and from what I choose to look up at night and things like that, and the research I tend to do and keep up with. One of those patients may only have one disease that they care about, and they spend hours and hours and hours and days and days and days researching that. And so in terms of factual knowledge, I gave up a long time ago the notion that I know more than my patient does about every aspect of their disease. Where we can partner, though, is that the patient has no context or no framework on which to hang that knowledge. And I have that. I have broad understanding of physiology and broad understanding of pathophysiology. I understand disease processes. I understand therapeutic interventions and how they work and how they don't work. And I understand, I'd like to believe I understand, the interconnections between various different components of the body and disease and non-disease. And so I view some of those things as more a partnership with that person or that patient who has been spending weeks and weeks and weeks researching and reading far more than I ever have on that particular disease, that I can help them place that information in the context of science, in the context of what they can expect, and how that information may or may not be true for their particular situation.
Dr. Roberts also believes that as information becomes easier for everyone to obtain, medical students are adapting too.
As younger people come up through college and come up through medical school, people are just simply more and more comfortable with working with public sources of data, with using non-traditional ways of learning things. And so I can't imagine that as time goes on, people, doctors and clinicians, are not going to become progressively more and more comfortable and simply expect that, because it's what they would do anyway. It's what they themselves would do.
Okay. So we have 3 notebooks. This is the ones we take to the doctors where we record the notes. These are the ones that have our reports in it. So this
Naomi Howard has been battling cancer since 2009. Today, she lives in Hampton Township and continues chemotherapy on Pittsburgh's North Side at Allegheny General Hospital. Naomi considers herself an empowered patient, but in the beginning, she struggled to find her way.
When you're first diagnosed, it's very difficult to be an empowered patient because you're so overwhelmed. And I was sure I was going to die within like 7 to 10 days. So you can't be an empowered patient, although I think I struggled at it. I remember sitting with my surgeon at that first appointment and asking questions like, do I need this test? I didn't even know what the test was. I read it on the internet. Didn't understand what it was, but I was sure I should ask that question because you're supposed to ask questions. So I asked that question. He's like, you don't have that kind of tumor. You don't need that test. I'm like, oh, okay. So I think I was struggling to be an empowered patient, but I was so overwhelmed with everything, and I couldn't get through 3 sentences without crying. You just sign for me here. Now give me a friend's name. Tell me somebody's name.
Naomi isn't crying anymore. She's too busy training poll workers as an election nears, working alongside her husband, John. He was also by her side as she began the fight for her life and initially sought opinions from more than one doctor.
The second physician was highly recommended. I had my list of questions. I had my things that I wanted to discuss. At this point, I'd probably been a good 6 months down the road, so I was a little bit, I probably could go maybe 5 or 6 sentences without crying instead of 1 or 2. And I had my list of questions, and we started going through the questions. All of a sudden, and it wasn't like this was a 3-hour appointment. It was in the standard what I felt was appropriate, because I do believe you have to respect the system. The system is there, and you have to work with that system and respect it on some level. But you can also buck it, but you do have to respect it on some level. And so it was within what I felt was appropriate that for a consultation, an initial consultation, and all of a sudden the physician stood up and he said, well, I think we're done here. And I'm like, I'm not done. I still have a few more questions. He's like, and he said,
no, we're done.
We're done. And I thought, me too. Me too. You know, I tell doctors I want them to be, I'm inviting them to be part of my team. Do you want to be part of my team? There's been a couple doctors that have been put off by that. But one of my doctors, every time I see him, he always puts his arm around me. He goes, I am so glad to be part of your team. Oh, look, how pretty. Oh, wow.
For Naomi and her husband, being empowered has meant being exceptional.
I had many, many people that were very helpful to me early on. And we called them Team Howard and the Pimps. And so people really worked hard to be a pimp. But PIMP stands for people in my path. And my prayer always was, dear God, I'll do the hard work if you would just put the people in my path to help me, because I don't know what to do. But if you put the people in my path, I can do the hard work. So one of my pimps sent me this book, and it's called Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and it's by Dr. Bernie Siegel. He's kind of a guru about exceptional patients. And I think empowered patients are exceptional patients. And he talks about them in this book. He feels that there are 3 types of patients. And the first 15 to 20% of all patients unconsciously or even consciously wish to die. On some level, they welcome cancer or another serious illness as a way to escape their problems through death or disease. The second group of patients is the middle of the spectrum, and he says they are about 60 to 70%. He feels they're like actors auditioning for a part. They perform to satisfy the physician. They act the way they think the doctor wants them to act. They hope that the doctor will do all the work. And then at the final extreme are the 15 to 20% who are exceptional. They are not auditioning. They're being themselves. They refuse to play the victim. When acting out that role, patients cannot help themselves, for everything is being done to them. It Exceptional patients refuse to be victims. They educate themselves and become specialists in their own care. They question the doctor because they want to understand their treatment and participate in it. They demand dignity, personhood, and control, no matter what the course of the disease. Exceptional patients want to know every detail of their X-ray reports. They want to know every number in their lab tests. My pathology reports, my scan reports, is all in sections. And they want to know what the printouts mean. And a doctor who harnesses that intense self-concern, instead of rejecting it and being too busy, dramatically improves the patient's chances. John determined early on, he just kept saying, you are going to be an exceptional patient.
The goals need to be aligned, and that's really where the strength of our performance is.
Tammy Minear is the Chief Quality Officer at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. It's a job that allows her to watch changes in medicine as they occur.
The options of who should make the best choices for me, and what questions I ask you, what will you tell me, what are my options, is very generationally evolving. And there are many senior physicians who admittedly probably struggle with this change and are trying to step up and learn the new skills. And there's a lot of new ones that actually demand it from their patients. So when you look at a younger generation surgeon, my job is to lay out for you your choices. It's your job to decide. So it will work itself through the generations, and I do think that it will naturally become the way medicine is practiced. And for those of us in the middle, yeah, it can be very clunky. And ultimately, I think you guys know our true goal as an enterprise is to strive to become a 5-star plan. And what are the skills that you really need to be a doctor? It's not necessarily just about how brilliant you are and that you can master the scientific knowledge of medicine. There also is this softer side of medicine. Can you have a conversation? Can you talk to me about what's happening in life? Can you deal with someone who's really sick in an ICU and I've got to make some tough decisions?
As a former practicing nurse, Tammy has worked with patients from all walks of life.
Not every patient is going to come at shared decision making with the same interest, willingness, and desire. And for those that are interested in and willing and want to participate, there's a ton of information out there. And they're self-starters and they're enthusiasts, whether they're on a blog, whether they're searching the internet, whether they're just dialoguing and emailing with their physician about what their choices are. They happen naturally.
Paul Getz lives in Plumboro, Pennsylvania. He works for a Pittsburgh company that sells respiratory medical devices. And in 2008, he woke up one day to find out he had completely lost his hearing in one ear.
It was a normal day. It was February. I got up, I went to work, got my first phone call, went to answer it. I'm like, that's funny. The phone's not working. I can't hear. So I went to another office, dialed the phone. I'm like, well, that's really weird. This phone's not working either. And then I started walking around like, well, that's funny. Other people are on the phone. And then I realized it wasn't the phone that wasn't working. It was I couldn't hear. So it was a spontaneous loss. They can't explain it. They call it idiopathic loss. This is the charging unit that comes with the system.
In Paul's case, the hearing loss was permanent, and his treatment options weren't promising.
You're listening to your doctors, and they're telling you they can't help you, so there aren't a whole lot of options. But being from the medical field and also being in the technology field, I says, well, wait a minute, there's got to be something out there.
Paul kept searching, and while conducting a routine internet search, he stumbled across a viable solution to his hearing loss. He took it to his doctors at Allegheny General Hospital and made headlines by becoming one of the first users of a unique device that combines dentistry with audiology.
People say, well, how do you hear with your teeth? And that's sort of the angle. It's a very interesting technology.
Today, Paul has advice for other patients facing a difficult situation.
Take ownership of your particular situation, right? Go out, do the research, keep an open mind, but I say trust but verify. You got to be careful. You know, again, I talk to a lot of people. There's a lot of good bulletin boards and blogs and that sort of thing going out there. You sort of have to be very conscious of what you're reading.
Mom, what were you doing today?
Today, Katie is in remission and looking forward to returning to Penn State this fall. She is certain that understanding her disease has helped her get well.
So I found out not too long ago that I am in major molecular remission, which is the best that can ever be said for this kind of cancer. And I am in a really good place with my meds, and they said that they're not going to bring them up for a while just because I am doing so well on them, and they are still being effective at reducing the cancer cells in my body. So I think just knowing and understanding the biology behind everything really, really helped me be a good patient for my doctors. And people say always try to be an informed patient. And there's one thing if I had just read up on the diagnosis, and but the fact that I had had years of school that I was still in, and still going through all of that before all of that has seeped out of my brain, and just having that base of, okay, I actually understand what is happening at a molecular level in my body. There's nothing that I could have done to prevent this, and it's just something that I have to live with, and I have to figure out how I'm going to deal with it. So I think I took informed patient to another level. So it was really nice, and I think my doctors really appreciated it too, because they could talk to me.
For her parents, it's been a long year, but they are looking forward to the year ahead.
And when we take her to Penn State, it will be a victory. And I know she's going to be where God wants her to be. And many times during this year, I would say to her father, when she was not feeling great or behaving well, I would say, she doesn't belong here. This is not where she's supposed to be. She's supposed to be in school with her friends, experiencing college. I just look back on this year and I can see God's hand on our family and giving us great things for the future. Not to say that it hasn't been painful, because it has been. But the great thing is that we know that we have her doctors and our friends and our family all around us.
Okay, you ready? It's just been a very, very special journey. You would obviously much rather have it that I never had this, but I think that it has given me a sense of, I just have a totally different perspective on a lot of things, and what's really important and what is not, and what I can change and what I cannot. And I'm grateful for what has gone on this past year, because it could have been a totally different story, had one little thing been different. I'm grateful for my family who takes care of me all the time, and for my friends who have been there for me through everything. I'm just very grateful.
For health providers, change is inevitable.
I think that the future of where we're headed is will be much better, but it's going to be bumpy.
So, to cancel a ballot, you want to do it? Sure. All right, so we're going to hit cancel the ballot.
Patients face changes in healthcare too, but with more access to information, they have new options.
And I think part of it is you have to let go of your embarrassment. You have to say, my very life depends on doing some of these things. My very life depends on researching treatment outcomes, getting the best care. My very life depends on decisions I'm making.
It's your life.
It's my life.
It's not their life, it's your life.
And while many doctors welcome informed, empowered patients, they urge some measure of caution as well.
What I do believe is that this condition of having the patient be so knowledgeable, sometimes with good information, sometimes with misinformation, with the patient being tremendously knowledgeable about the disease or condition for which they have, that's not going away. And that's going to actually get even more prevalent and even more advanced than it is now.
And it is a double-edged sword, okay? I think that, there's this old adage of paper won't refuse ink, which means basically that people can write down anything they want. Well, The internet does not refuse typing on keys either. So people can write anything that they want. Doesn't mean it's true. And we try to guide families to the right places to look for information, because there are good sources of information. But it is a double-edged sword.
I think the kind of world of medicine not that long ago was very different. It was very paternalistic. It was very much, this is what we're going to do, and this is kind of the end of the discussion. Now I think, just like you said, more than ever, there's a lot of access to information. People need to understand what they're being treated with, why that would work in their, specific condition.
Because there are 3 trillion blood cells.
I think, why Katie even came to mind is I think she's Katie herself as well as her family. I think it's the perfect example of how, a patient and their family can be empowered, and that doesn't mean that you're at odds with your physician. I think it means actually just the opposite. I think it means that you have come to probably fully know and accept your diagnosis. I think big picture is, when you actually work as a team, you trust your physician, they trust you to, really access other information. I think it can really strengthen not just the bond that you have, but ultimately the quality of the care that you receive.